What is going on, everyone? Welcome to RIPL. My name is Jesse Hay, and today I'm joined here by Dalton Hesley of University of Miami's Rescuer Reef. I first met Dalton probably 6 or 7 years ago now, and I'm stoked to have him here with us today. Dalton, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you. Very happy to be here. Appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. So the format's simple. I've got three open-ended questions for you to get to know you and the great work that you're doing in ocean conservation.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, so first up, we've got tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you first get involved in ocean conservation?
Yeah, I always love that question because mine was definitely unique. I'm originally from the Midwest, hence the flannel. So I grew up far from any coastline. So the fact that I now work to conserve and restore corals is a little out of the norm. But I ended up going to college for a bachelor's of science in biology. So I always had this kind of interest and affinity to nature and conservation, but was just lucky in that my senior year of college, I saw a flyer on the wall for a study abroad course. And that course was an intro to coral reefs. It was in the Bahamas. And then part of the class was actually getting you scuba certified. And so I was kind of looking at it as a bucket list thing where I always wanted to learn how to scuba dive. I'd actually never left the States before that. So going to the Bahamas seemed really, really exciting. And the class itself, was definitely something that was at least, up my alley. But as you could imagine, I loved it. It was a game changer for me. Just such a unique experience and opportunity. I fell in love with the ocean and more specifically corals, because everything I had learned about the natural world on land seemed 10 times cooler under the water. And so then when I graduated, that was my senior year when I did that class, I graduated, I knew I needed to build a resume. So I did some voluntary internships, some paid internships to just try and gain more experiences, again, build a resume, and then start applying to grad school. Was very fortunate to get into the University of Miami, where I started to learn more about the marine science and coral reef world. And now I'm a full-time researcher, trying to understand how best to grow corals and then restore populations for the foreseeable future.
That's an awesome story. I love when you hear the stories of people from places that you wouldn't even ever think they'd end up in ocean conservation. That's something I see a lot of parallels in. I'm originally from just outside of Toronto and found myself doing this kind of stuff. But when you see people like yourself from the Midwest and ending up in coral reef conservation, which probably is almost unthinkable to most people in the Midwest, it's awesome to see. And
And
yeah, and on the
I
topic,
would say that happens more than you'd think, where, I obviously met a ton of different marine scientists, coral biologists over the years, and a ton of them come from places very far from any coastline. And I think it's just because they have such appreciation and respect for these ecosystems, because they weren't easily accessible. So I always try and tell people, like, you don't have to grow up with a coral reef in your backyard to be a scientist, a coral biologist. And we're proof of that.
yeah, that's an awesome takeaway. And just on the topic of the study abroad class, looking at
Mhm.
getting to that age where I'm looking at colleges, looking at different programs and stuff like that. And I think that's something that I would like to look at. That's something interesting to keep in mind that I'm going to definitely consider when it comes to looking at schools.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to. You have to. I think one of the best things you can do is just explore different options. You might try 9 things that you don't like, but that's useful information, because the 10th might be a home run. So I always encourage people to just put themselves out there, try different things, because that's the best way to figure out, what your calling is.
Absolutely. Okay. So for our second question, I've got
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about Rescue Reef and how is your work making a difference in the world of ocean conservation?
Yeah, Rescue Reef is really the ideal place for me because it is a coral research and restoration program here at the University of Miami. But its emphasis is on community engagement. So it's an extension of our research lab that then affords any individual, diver or snorkeler, to actually come on the boat with us, to meet our scientists, learn a little bit about what it is that we're doing, and then help hands-on, first person, because we realize that that's maybe one of the best ways to learn. is to actually learn by doing. So that's really the primary goal of the rescue program, is to engage a broad audience, get more individuals involved, to help advance our coral research and restoration, while simultaneously building this community of ocean stewards, people that better understand the importance of coral reefs, the issues they face, but also then the tools available for their conservation. Because that's what it's going to take to really restore their future, is community action, social change. So I've always thought that I was a great person to be a part of that, because I didn't grow up next to coral reefs. In fact, I didn't really know anything about coral reefs until I was in my early 20s. So very late bloomer. And I think a lot of people are surprised by that. You might assume that I loved corals since I could walk, but I didn't know a thing about them until, I was well into my academic career. So I think that allows me to relate to people and kind of meet them where they are, because I realized myself that the more I learned about corals, the more I appreciated them, the more I respected their importance, and wanted to fight for their future. And so I think that means that any individual can end up on that same path. It just takes a spark. And so I love being at kind of the intersection of the sciences and society, to try and get more people involved through this rescue program.
That's awesome. I love the whole idea of creating ocean stewards by way of education. That perfectly aligns with what MAKO tries to do, in that MAKO tries to engage, members of the youth community specifically, to create kind of that next generation of ocean stewards and kind of continue that lineage there. But, I remember the first time I heard about Rescue Reef, I was on Instagram years and years ago. And then I heard you were doing it. My dad's office at the time was at that WeWork on Lincoln Road. And I heard you were doing a presentation there. I was like, oh, I begged my dad, we got to go, we got to go. And, after that, I love what you guys do. I always have. I heard that presentation, I was hooked. Every year at Tortuga, I'd beg my parents, oh, we got to go stop by. We got to go stop by. We got to go see Dalton. We got to go. And no, I've always been a huge fan of Rescue Reef. I think what you guys are doing is awesome. And I think you guys have found that perfect intersection between the research science part and the citizen science, and then the education piece. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Yeah. And it's people like you that reminds us that what we're doing is important, because, it's your future that we're talking about. And so we want to make sure that individuals really get how important these ecosystems are, what kind of role they play in their day-to-day lives, and then give them the confidence to really be champions for coral reefs. Because one thing that we recognize is, we're scientists. And so there's only so many people that we're able to reach. And when we do reach these people, we're definitely perceived, as these biased coral lovers. And so sometimes that means it doesn't really resonate. But when people hear from you, your friends, your classmates, your family members, they hear from you, that's a whole different ballgame, because they know you, they trust you. And so you can have a lot more of a positive impact than we can. And so the idea of being able to connect with people like you and it resonate, and then you decide to try and do what you can to make a positive difference, that's how this is going to work. So it's really great to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole point of the spin-off of this podcast off of MAKO was to create kind of make ocean conservation more accessible for young people, because young people, through social media and through video platforms, and to make it kind of an open dialogue, an open, engaged conversation that makes ocean conservation, breaks it down and makes it more accessible and more understandable for younger kids and that younger demographic of people.
Yeah. And I can't help but feel like the tide is turning, because this next generation youth, like, they get it. They realize how important it is, and they're not scared to act. They use their voices, they use their platforms, they're out in the community, and it is so inspiring, and it gives me a lot of optimism. So, programs like yours are really, really important.
It's a bright future, and we're excited to just be a small part of that and do what we can to push more kids into ocean conservation and raise awareness for the right causes. All right, and then for our third question, on the topic of Rescue Reef, how can people that are listening to this podcast get involved in your guys' work?
Yeah, that's an important question. And it's something that we really kind of prioritize, is what can you actually do about it? Because, doing is the most important part. So I would say our bread and butter are the citizen science expeditions, where people that can actually come on the boat with us, help with coral gardening, monitoring, coral planting, and again, divers and snorkelers. So anyone that's in the Miami area should definitely look us up. We go out maybe once or twice every month, and it's open to the public. We make them as accessible as possible because we realize that some people are balling on a budget, so we don't want that to be a really limiting factor. So I would encourage them to check us out and sign up for our email list if they're local. If they're not able to join us offshore or just live far from our area, there are still so many different things they can do today that make a positive impact on corals. So our website and social media page have a ton of tools, from small things that are really easy to change today to more, intermediate to higher level things, because we want it to be kind of a spectrum where people are able to kind of get this snowball effect or momentum, because they really do add up, and then other people see you doing these things and they kind of respond accordingly. So there's a page within our website that's specific to coral conservation, that have these little ideas, things like instead of focusing only on recycling, thinking about how do you reduce your plastic consumption in the first place. So it's like a reusable water bottle instead of a plastic one that you recycle. Same with reusable Tupperware or reusable grocery bags. Other ones you can think about is like where you get your products, whether you're shopping locally, which has a smaller carbon footprint, or thinking about secondhand, whether you're buying upcycled things. Again, these are little things that are going to have a big impact, and trying to just support organizations or businesses that really prioritize sustainability. But then that goes all the way up to policy, representatives. That's maybe the way to have the most impact, is just to use your voice, communicate those values, and let people know, like, hey, our environment, our ecosystems, our climate are important to us. I need you to prioritize that in how you govern. And they'll listen. They really do. And so, again, we have all these tools online that I really encourage people to check out, because that's really the whole reason we exist, is because we feel like people want to do something, but they just don't know where to start. And so that's where we come in.
I think that's awesome. I think there's tremendous value in that whole accessibility piece, because I think so many people see the research stuff, they see the ocean research stuff, and it seems kind of this far-fetched, kind of unattainable. It's like this abstract
Yep.
concept to them. And it's almost this idea of, I can't help because I'm not a researcher. But
Yep.
it's important that people understand that that's not the case. Like you mentioned, the reusable water bottles, the sustainable shopping alternatives, there's small little things that play into the bigger picture that everyone can do. You don't have to be a professional researcher necessarily.
Yep, exactly. And I think that might be another thing I want to emphasize is our Rescue Reef program is a citizen science program, meaning that it's a science or research project that citizens, the general public, can support. But we are just one of thousands of citizen science programs. So if coral reefs aren't really your thing, or you're too far from the coastline, you can just Google citizen science, and I guarantee you there are really cool, impactful citizen science programs in your area that you can volunteer with anytime you want. So it's a great way to learn, make a difference, but then also potentially build a career path, because we've hired students from citizen science expeditions, just because they showed a lot of potential and passion for it. So it's a good way to try and network and learn about future career opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's tremendous value in not only career opportunities, but also, I try to emphasize too, when we talk to kids, I try to say, hey, there's a part that everyone has to play, and everyone has their own role in this whole big picture. If we want to establish our goal, or we want to reach that goal of creating that next generation of ocean heroes and fostering sustainability in the long run, we have to each play our own individual role, regardless of how small that may be or seemingly insignificant. There is no real such thing as a small action, because, in totality, everything comes together and helps.
Yeah, you nailed it. And I think that that's what ends up being the defeating mindset, is if you assume, you can't make a difference or someone else is going to figure it out, well, then we're stuck. Because you're right, it's going to take all of us. It's going to take a village. And so it's kind of all of our individual responsibilities to do what we can, because then collectively, that's when we, see the tides change.
There it is. I love that. I love the tide change. I love using that phrase.
Definitely.
Good one. But okay, for our third and final question. Oh, sorry, I already said. I was the third and final question. My apologies on that one. But I want to say thank you so much for joining us. For everyone listening, you heard him. Go shoot them a follow on Instagram. Go check out their website. Sign up for their mailing list. Rescue Reef, great people doing great things, and they're going to be around at the forefront of ocean conservation for a long time. Dalton, I want to say thank you. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this here.
Thank you, Jesse. I really appreciate it. A fun conversation. I hope the viewers enjoyed it, and they reach out. We'd love to connect with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Reach out to Dalton and he'll get you situated with citizen science or whatever it may be. Rescue Reef is a really cool organization. I'm really excited that you were here to talk to us today. And for all those of you listening, keep making ripples.